Fabulous. Here we go. So delighted that you are able to come along this morning. I'm Paula Gulhuli. I'm the Education Advisor for Adoption UK in Scotland. My background is in education and I am an adoptive parent, so those two roles are incredibly important to me. If you have come along this morning not knowing very much about Adoption UK, then I think that you are in for a treat. By the time you leave, I hope you'll have lots of ideas about how you can engage with our service and how we can help you to increase the support that you offer to adoptive, kinship and fostering families in your local authority. It's my hope that if you hold a multi-agency meeting for a care experienced child or young person, then you keep in mind the supports that we offer and encourage families to connect with us. Bear in mind that we support schools and teachers too. This is the format for this morning, aiming to go through it as quickly as possible so that there's a chance for you to chat at the end. We've been around for 50 years. We were started by a group of adoptive parents who were struggling to find the support and understanding that their families needed. The focus of our organisation has always been on support through the helpline, the community events, training for professionals and for parents. We've always been an organisation that seeks to support. We are not an adoption agency and we've never been involved in matching children with families. And although we started as an organisation to support adoptive families, more recently the organisation has expanded significantly, which will become really apparent as we go through. So now we support kinship carers and we support all families that are affected by FASD. Our organisation, this is a quick overview that shows the different strands and how they come together. So we've got Adoption UK core services, FASD services, and the Kinship Care and Advice Service Scotland services. They all kind of operate in a similar way to start off with. They all offer helpline, training, family events, community events. They all have a website with masses of information and links on it. But as you go through each service, we also offer additional layers of support. So those families with greater needs can access enhanced services. Tessa stands for Therapeutic Educational Support Services Adoption, which I'll explain about in a little while. So in terms of core services, education is one of those services that exists across the board. We have a website that's full of education resources. There are fact sheets, guides to parents and professionals around some of the common themes that our families encounter. There are blogs, podcasts, video presentations, and we're adding to these all of the time. So if a need comes up, there is something that needs to be explored, we can do that. We can try and put something together and roll that out. There are also FASD specific resources, which Barbara will talk about in a little while. And if you can't find something that you need us to develop, then that's something that I think that we could probably take on board. We offer education consultations on Fridays. Parents often need a lot of help to make sense of the education system. It's not as straightforward as it should be. Parents often don't know what supports exist or how to access them. They might not have, or they might need support extending their awareness of support strategies that they can use in the home. And although the education consultation is predominantly used by parents, there isn't anything to stop professionals from using that service too. We also run monthly education discussions that bring or try to bring parents and professionals together. They're generally themed, So the last one was on transitions, and there will be a short presentation followed by an open discussion where everybody that's come along gets a chance to take part in the discussion. They share ideas, they ask questions, they develop strategies, and it's an opportunity to build support networks. And the idea that, you know, having all these different views, looking at something gives you that sort of 360-degree perspective, and you're more likely to come up with a strategy. Now, I think you probably have control of your mic, so you might want to pop yourself on mute if there's things going on in the background. You're probably aware of Let's Learn Together already, which is a very comprehensive guide to some of the difficulties that adopted children face in school, alongside suggested strategies of support. These can be downloaded from our website, and it sits alongside a guide to adoption support services that exist across Scotland. In addition to these supports, which anyone can access, families can also access support through training. So we offer connective parenting courses, therapeutic parenting courses, information about NBR. And we also have an amazing webinar library that our members can access. There are a huge amount of information on the webinar library. It's also worth saying that our community events have an education theme too. At each of the community events, it's an opportunity for parents and children to connect and have informal conversations about things that affect them. And for me, it normalizes adoption to hear my daughter chatting to her friends about her foster family, and it gives her an opportunity to process. And it's all done in a very sort of normal, supported way. There's a great feeling of belonging that grows out of that, and acceptance. An example of one of the activities that we run is our weekend trip to Whiston Lodge, and anybody who's ever been there will just explain to you how kind of magic it feels for all the families to have a huge sense of relief as they walk through the door, knowing that it's a place where they belong. They don't have to try to put on a front. You know, all behaviours are understood. The children have these connections that they've built already year on year. It's a really lovely experience for our kids, and very special. What's not on this list is Adoption Week in November, which we can talk about later. One of the other kind of entry-level services within education is the fact sheets that we have. There are two fact sheets in particular that are relevant, I think, to the discussion today. One is talking about adoption, which has information about the adoption process and things to be aware of if you're engaging in conversations with children and families. Adoptions change quite considerably over the years, so the reality is often very different to what the general public might think. And the second fact sheet is the latest one that we have developed, which aims to draw some attention to some of the specific difficulties encountered by adopted children in schools. There are certain aspects to being adopted that present different difficulties to those faced by other care experienced groups. So this fact sheet grew out of conversations with adopted adults and young people. And even where the experiences of adoption were very different, there were some common themes which emerged. And it can be quite difficult for our young people to articulate these really big feelings. So that's where the project that Carol is doing, the EProject, which actually, now that I think about it, I forgot to mention earlier, the EProject is the project that sits, if I just pop back, the EProject grew out of the Promise, and it sits across all three of those areas for our young people to help empower them and help them to articulate their experiences. So these were some of the things that grew out of those conversations and are in this fact sheet. The depth of loss is something that's really hard to articulate. So one of the adults, when she was talking to me, described it as losing 13 family members in a car crash. And I think her point was that this trauma would be very visible. It would be absolutely horrific, but it's quite common for people to dismiss the trauma of adoption by saying, oh, you know, you were a baby, you were very young, don't remember it. So we need to make the needs of our adopted young people more visible. Some adopted people spoke about the difficulty they had with identity and understanding of self. The need to belong and not feeling quite as if they did belong was quite common. One person spoke of the need to fit in and how she felt that she just became the person that the other person wanted her to be. So what came through was this very fragile sense of self. And again, the work that Carol is doing in the EProject will look at both of those two areas and support our young people to explore those things and help them to recognise their strengths and their talents and become more confident in being themselves. In schools, the needs of adopted young people can be hidden. There's no obligation for parents to declare the adoption status. And it might be that our Scottish tracking systems don't pick up or record the status of an adopted child where the child had been previously in care. And this can be because adopted children move into your local authority with their adoptive family, leaving behind their kind of records and their names. So experience tells me that although maybe some of those things should transfer over, they might not always do that in practice. The other group that often gets missed is when children are adopted from overseas. So monitoring, tracking of adopted children is really quite difficult in Scottish schools, and a lot of it comes down to how the school themselves is tracking and supporting children, but it isn't collected nationally. Something else worth flagging up is the prevalence of adoption in middle-class families. The depth of need that we see isn't addressed by having parents that do a good enough job. The need still exists, and the issues of identity are still something that needs to be explored. And this might be particularly relevant where children are moving, perhaps between social groups in society. Adoptive parents often tell us about their struggle to get their child's needs recognised. And I think exploring bias within this is something worth doing too. Another hidden need of adoption is neurodiversity and prenatal alcohol exposure. Adopted children are far more likely to have additional needs on top of adoption, and yet perhaps, or trauma, and perhaps professionals hold off diagnosing because trauma makes things more complex, and yet the needs are far greater. And like all care experienced children, adopted people can feel stigmatized. So the word adoption in itself can be triggering. And our young people and adults report how the word is used in society and how it has a kind of throwaway context associated with it. And again, not many people are familiar with the intricacies of modern adoption. And information comes from films, it comes from TV, and perpetuates myths. So that's kind of our sort of education entry-level service, if you like. And that's where the fact sheets belong. They would belong to this core service that we provide. But when we move through Adoption UK and we look at the different tiers that we offer, in Adoption UK, one of the services that is open to adoptive parents is Tessa. So the barometer research indicates that 70% of adoptive families are facing a continual struggle for support. And we also know that funding, expertise, timeliness of support are in short supply. You will know how long the waiting lists are for CAMHS, and you will also know the limitations of CAMHS. So the aim of Tessa is to provide support before families reach crisis point, to give them access to expert services early, and therefore strengthen the developmental environment for the child, and also strengthen the parents' understanding, and to just generally enhance that whole family well-being and encourage holistic support around the family. We know that where parents have been left to struggle for long periods of time, they are more likely to suffer from blocked care, and then it becomes increasingly difficult to be able to step back and have that perspective that you need to introduce change. By stepping in early and building capacity and strengthening supports, particularly around the core elements of Tessa, we aim to reduce the need for crisis intervention. So Tessa is accessed through a referral from a social worker. It can be accessed from anywhere from a few months after placement to years down the line. Families can contact post-adoption support from their local council or voluntary agency. Local authorities and adoption agencies remain the first point of call for adoption support, but local authorities can then refer on to us. Tessa isn't suitable for families in crisis. It's an early intervention programme, and it's suitable when the needs are low to medium. The core supports of Tessa are peer support, support from the clinical psychologist, and the parent reflective group sessions. An experienced adoptive parent supports and advises adopters, and the parent partner is matched according to personal strengths or adoptive family needs, and sometimes geography too. In addition to support from the parent partner, the adoptive parent has 6 reflective group sessions led by a clinical psychologist and lead therapist, which build knowledge and understanding of their child and family dynamic, which really helps families to find that place again where they are enjoying family life. And it also encourages a partnership between adopters and professionals, which we hope is the model of relationship going forward for them. The clinical psychologist is able to give a comprehensive explanation of the child's needs, which will unpack any issues that the family are dealing with and suggest approaches. The clinical psychologist can validate the adoptive parent's strengths and abilities, because I think if you are dealing with a difficult situation, you can lose sight of the strengths that you have and the abilities that you have too. The clinical psychologist will also write a report for parents, which parents can share with the school if they want to, and some parents will even invite a member of school staff along to that appointment, and that can be a 3-hour-long meeting. And the waiting lists for support from Tessa are far, far shorter than any waiting list for CAMHS. Tessa helps parents to be able to talk confidently about their child's needs and to access better informal support, which leads to the child being calmer and family life being more settled. In addition to these things, parents can also access the training that Adoption UK offer. So the connected parenting, NVR, therapeutic parenting, for example. And there are other kind of bespoke training things that will crop up through the year too. And it's hoped that if families access the core element of Tessa, then that will be sufficient to meet the needs of most families. However, after engagement with the core programme, for those families who still have greater needs, there's also this enhanced tier of support for families that need it, and that might include some therapy or counselling. So you can see the feedback that we've had from people who have participated in the Tessa programme. It's been great. And you absolutely cannot underestimate the power of talking to somebody who gets it, which is why activities and events like Whiston Lodge are just so great. Being an adoptive parent, I always think is a bit like being a detective. So having the clinical psychologist linking the behaviours that you see in the present with what's happened in the past can be really quite enlightening. And it can also help parents to reframe behaviours. And allow for more empathy and connection. And having that really close partnership between the professional and the parent enables the parent to feel confident, and the support from the parent partner will do that too. And it can help adoptive parents to talk about the behaviours that they find very difficult to support. Tessa would be something that could be considered at a multi-agency meeting for adopted children, because I think it would be so helpful for so many families.
Thanks, Paula. Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Ogston. I'm FASD project lead at FASD Hub Scotland. I'm adoptive parent of 2 teenagers, both of whom have a history of prenatal alcohol exposure. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just telling you about FASD Hub and how we support families. But before I do that, I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to FASD. I'm sure many of you will have heard of it, but maybe are not quite aware of how prevalent it is within our country. So FASD stands for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, and it's the result of an alcohol-exposed pregnancy that affects the developing brain and body of an individual before they were born. FASD is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition, often referred to as a hidden disability. You may have heard about facial features associated with FASD. There's about 10% of individuals that have facial features, which include a smooth philtrum, a thin upper lip, and a narrow eye opening. So it's a hidden disability, and it's likely to be that in every classroom in Scotland, there is at least one individual who has FASD, though the chances of them actually having a diagnosis is very slim indeed. FASD affects about 3 to 5% of the population, and it is the most common yet unrecognised neurodevelopmental condition in the world, in the UK and probably in the world. There are more people with FASD than there are with dyslexia, ADHD and autism combined. It's thought that 1 in 20 people could have FASD in Scotland, which compares to 1 in 94 with autism spectrum disorder. And sadly, care experienced children and young people are 4 times as likely to have FASD than the general population. There was some research in Peterborough that revealed that 75% of children who went forward for an adoption medical had prenatal alcohol exposure noted on their medical records. So it is a real significant issue within not only the care experience in the adoptive world, but across the whole country. And FASD Hub Scotland, so the next slide please, Paula. FASD Hub Scotland are funded by the Scottish Government to provide support services to all families, so adoptive, biological, kinship, fostering and step families. We provide a tiered service. We have our tier 1 services, which are open to all, and they include a helpline that's open 4 days a week, and our website, which I'll speak more about in a moment. And we've got a significant social media presence as well across Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. More kind of tailored support and individual support to families is available in our tier 2 services. And this includes a Facebook group, which has over 300 families members of at the moment. And it's a very supportive place for peer-to-peer support. And through our Facebook group, we also have virtual meetups for families on a fortnightly basis. We offer one-to-one support to families. We can match families with a parent partner or an FASD advisor who can help identify goals and offer support around education or diagnosis or general parenting strategies, whatever's going on for that family. And we also have a large range of training available, from 3-hour courses that are real good grounding into what is FASD to our education modules, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And we have webinars. We've got a webinar with Childline next week, which is open to all as well, to find out more about their services. We also have therapeutic services. We can access like appointments with our clinical psychologist, counselling, life story work. And so there's lots and lots going on, and we're very happy to support families in whatever support they need, and very happy to support professionals in the same way too. The next slide, please, Paula. So just thinking specifically about what support we can offer around education. On our website, which is FASD then we have an education area within that, which is brand new. It's only been there for a couple of weeks. And you can also access our website through the Adoption UK website as well, if you find the hub. And within our education resources, we have 6 fact sheets. I think 3 are for parents and carers and 3 are for educators. And they cover topics such as transitions and common strengths for learners with FASD and preparing for meetings and accessing additional support. And a couple of others there as well. They're really, really popular, these fact sheets. They were written by our FASD education advisors, who are sadly no longer with us, but it's a great legacy that they've left behind. And these fact sheets are really popular resources. We have FASD Makes Me Me, which is our animation. It was pulled together by the Hub last September as part of FASD month and involved the work of individuals, children, young people and families affected by FASD. And it's a great little animation. It's aimed at 8 to 13-year-olds. However, there's something there for all ages, and we show it to a lot more adults than we do children and young people. And you can find that on our YouTube channel. But to go alongside the animation, we've also developed education resource packs for schools. So there's one for primary school and there's one for secondary school. It's got lots of activities and resources just to help keep the conversation going about FASD. Also on our website, you'll find our top tips for educators video, which is also very new. And it's just a really short little video, kind of graphic based, that shows our top 10 or top 12 tips for supporting learners with FASD. And you'll also find information about our training courses for educators. So our main training programme for educators is FASD Insights and Strategies for Educators. And we've just finished a run of sessions of those. We've had over 100 educators go through that quite recently. And it's a 3-module programme. Module 1 looks at what is FASD. Module 2 looks at reframing our thinking through the FASD lens, common challenges in the classroom, the impact of alcohol and brain development. We look at the neurosequential model, the neurobehavioural model. It's very much the kind of theory behind what then comes in Module 3, which is our strategies module. Strategies for the classroom is based around the Shinari indicators, and a lot of just really good top tips in those modules. The modules run on a regular basis, and educators can choose which date suits them to attend. There's usually a variety of dates, and they are free to attend those. However, the course can also be bought in by schools and by local authorities as a 3-hour programme, ideal for kind of half days and service days. And if you'd like to know more information about that, I'd be very happy to hear from you. But generally, we've got lots of experience, lots of resources around education and FASD. So if there's anything you'd like to know, please feel free to call our helpline or to drop us an email, and we'll be happy to offer you any support that we can. Thanks, Paula.
The other service that we offer is KCAS, the Kinship Care and Advice Service Scotland. It's very similar, I suppose, in operation to the sort of Adoption UK model that I talked about earlier. KCAS provides advice, resources and training for kinship carers, or we also endeavour to raise awareness and work with social workers and health and social care practitioners to improve kinship care practice across local authorities. The website kinship.scot provides a huge range of information for kinship carers, everything from explaining policy to what benefits carers are entitled to. Many calls to the helpline are from carers that are struggling to know what supports they can access and what supports they are entitled to. Both professionals and carers can use the service too. We have a lot of calls actually from social workers looking to support kinship carers. Our expert kinship advisors have lived experience, and carers will just automatically recognise that they are talking to somebody who just gets it. KCAS also have community groups which provide informal supports too. Probably the best way really to know the range of supports that are on offer is to look at the website kinship.scot. A new resource that was recently added to that website is the What Now booklet, which was developed alongside Kinship carers in the advisory group. And again, like Adoption UK, we are continually developing our service to deliver what is needed most by our families. And that's a relatively new addition to the organisation. But it does offer the same tiered level of support. Kinship.scot website will be able to explain a wee bit more about what's needed there. And if you were to contact the helpline staff would be able to explain more about the service that you might particularly need and how they can match that. The Kinship Care Week in March was really very successful, and again it's about building community and informal support networks. So there were family trips to Blair Drummond and to the theatre, and there were lots of happy memories that were developed. And the EProject. So the EProject launched last year to empower people who have been adopted in kinship care or have FASD. The aim is to create a community of all ages where people grow in confidence and learn new skills. There are monthly sessions which develop life skills in age-appropriate ways. Children have the opportunity to take part in creative opportunities like digital design, filmmaking. Older participants can join the Youth Advisory Board, and it's all about having their voices heard, providing opportunities to influence activities and influence policy and influence the direction really that the organisation will go. The children and young people are supported by youth and community workers who have lived experience of care. And when the sessions initially started, I think a lot of them were on Zoom, but there are more and more face-to-face activities that are coming back on board. And again, a lot of the sessions to begin with were about getting to know people, building trust, building relationships, and some of the discussions centred around changes, dealing with trauma, recognising your strengths, realising what potential you have, and looking at positive outcomes. All the sessions are aimed to encourage and support personal growth and understanding, and that ability to articulate what your feelings are and what your thoughts are, even because it will be a difficult process, I suppose, working through these really big feelings. But children will be supported. There is a long life working group who will be taking over Adoption Week Scotland for a day. And just to give you a wee example of some of the types of discussion, their last session included an exploration of stereotypes. So there was the opportunity to connect stereotypes to personal experiences, an opportunity to look ahead and challenge the stereotypes that are imposed on adopted, kinship or FASD families. So again, all about empowering that voice and developing confidence and enabling young people to speak out. One of the next face-to-face events actually is happening in Stirling on the 11th of June. In that session, there will be therapet dogs, there'll be crafts, there's rock painting, there's hiding, and then some of these sessions will take place in real life. So those kind of meaty discussions will have the opportunity to take place. Carol Hunter is our lead on that project. So what next? What next indeed? It would be great if you could help us in making sure that individual schools know about us, know about the services that we can provide, and help families connect with us where you think that we will be able to offer supports to them. I think the support that we offer as an organisation is immense. So please help us spread the word to families and to schools. If there's a group contact that you can give us for your local authority who will help us to share our newsletters and flyers, we would love for schools to know what we can offer, and especially I think when it comes to those multi-agency meetings. The barometer findings are out next month. I'm sure you will find the results in that very interesting. And there are monthly discussions that happen every month. Please help spread the word, maybe pop along to one of the discussions and have your voice one of those that are heard. So that's the end of our presentation, or a quick tour of what Adoption UK looks like and what it can offer.